In this video, we will be talking about adaptation, and in particular, adapting a fairy tale. But before you can adapt something, you have to have something to work with. So in the next part of the video, you will be listening to The Goose Girl, as told by Dorothea Vineman to the Brothers Grimm. This is an excerpt of Dorothea Vineman's Goose Girl, as told to the Brothers Grimm. It can be found at Project Gutenberg. This is the very beginning of the fairy tale. The king of a great land died and left his queen to take care of their only child. This child was a daughter who was very beautiful, and her mother loved her dearly and was very kind to her. And there was a good fairy too, who was fond of the princess and helped her mother to watch over her. When the princess grew up, she was betrothed to a prince who lived a great way off. And as the time drew near for her to be married, she got ready to set off on her journey to his country. Then the queen, her mother, packed up a great many costly things, jewels and gold and silver, trinkets, fine dresses, and in short, everything that became a royal bride. And she gave her waiting maid to ride with her and give her into the bridegroom's hands. And each had a horse for the journey. Now the princess's horse was the fairy's gift, and it was called Falada, and could speak. When the time came for them to set off, the fairy went out to her bedchamber and took a little knife and cut off a lock of her hair, and gave it to the princess and said, "Take care of it, dear child, for it is a charm that may be of use to you on the road." Then they all took a sorrowful leave of the princess, and she put the lock of hair into her bosom, got up on her horse, and set off on her journey to the bridegroom's kingdom. One day, as they were riding along by a brook, the princess began to feel very thirsty, and she said to her maid, "Pray, get down and fetch me some water in my golden cup out of yonder brook, for I want a drink." "Nay," said the maid, "if you are thirsty, get off yourself, and stoop down by the water and drink. I shall not be your waiting maid any longer." Then the princess was so thirsty she got down and knelt over the little brook and drank, for she was frightened, and dared not bring out her golden cup. And she wept and said, "Alas, what will become of me?" And the lock answered her and said, "Alas, alas, if thy mother knew it, sadly, sadly, she would rue it." This is an excerpt of Dorothea Vineman's Goose Girl, as told to the Brothers Grimm. The production concept is once a humble goose girl. The princess, now a queen, recounts and reenacts her tale to the next generation to emphasize how important it is to be true to oneself. When the time came for me and my maid to set out to the prince's kingdom, my friend the fairy went into her bedchamber and took out a little knife and cut off a lock of her hair and gave it to me and said, "Take care of it, dear child. It is a charm that may be of use to you on the road." Then we all took a sorrowful leave, and I put the lock of hair into my bosom, got up on my horse, and set off on my journey to my bridegroom's kingdom. One day, as we were riding along a brook, I began to get very thirsty, and I said to my maid, "Pray, get down and fetch me some water in my golden cup out of yonder brook, for I want a drink." "Nay," said the maid, "if you are thirsty, get off yourself and stoop down by the water and drink. I shall not be your waiting maid any longer." I was so thirsty that I got down and I knelt over the little brook and drank, for I was so frightened and dared not bring out my golden cup. I wept and I said, "Alas, what is to become of me?" And the lock of hair answered me and said, "Alas, alas, if thy mother knew it, sadly, sadly would she rue it." So now that we've worked with an original text and seen an adaptation in a performance, let's talk a little bit about the adaptation choices. The first adaptation that you saw in the video was that the performer chose a narrator. So the narrator was changed from the original text from a third-person narrator to first person, and that first person became the princess much later in her life, telling a story later on. The second adaptation was that the performer chose a production concept, which she told us was Once Upon a Humble Goose Girl. And her idea for this, as she explains in the video, is also that as the narrator or the older princess, she's kind of reflecting on the story later in her life and has kind of a moral to stay true to yourself. In addition to the production concept, the performer made a third adaptation, which was to cut the original text and to start later in the piece. In addition to cutting, the performer also divided out the different characters in the story and noted them by bolding the kind of text in her script. So you have the narrator, the fairy, the narrator, princess, and then the maid. I think the lock of hair also exists, but the division of characters becomes a place where she can also make some adaptations to kind of distinguish between characters and what is going on. To further develop the performance, the performer makes a fourth adaptation, which is to use costumes. So we've already said that the narrator is the older princess or the queen telling her story to the next generation. And so to signify the queen, the performer chooses to make a construction paper crown and wear a blanket as a cape to kind of signify that royalty. So using everyday objects to further build the performance. Not only does the performer divide different characters, but she also tries and works towards vocal characterization to distinguish between the different characters in the piece. So the older princess narrator sounds a specific way, the young princess sounds different than the fairy or the maid or the lock of hair. So she really is working with vocal choices to distinguish between and among those different characters. The sixth adaptation that the performer makes is that of some minimal staging. So she uses a chair to sit on that might be a storytelling chair for the older queen who's talking to the next generation. That chair might represent a throne, perhaps. She also makes a choice to move the camera away so you can see kind of most of her body as she performs in the space. Though she doesn't use a lot of props and she doesn't have a lot of costuming or kind of scenery, she does have some minimal staging to suggest what's going on in the story and who she might be as the narrator. Now that we've talked a little bit about adaptation and how you go from text to script to performance, I imagine you might have some questions. Do you have questions? If so, go ahead and send me a message through Canvas or talk to me in class. I am so excited for your upcoming performances.